statewide study. I'm going to ask Mr. Jeff
Schmucker.
Schmucker. Thank you.
You wouldn't be the first person to pronounce that.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having us today. It's always good to see a sister agency. I think this is the first time that I've presented to any of our other sister agencies, so I will remember my first. I'm Jeff Schmucker, Planning Director with the Central Florida Regional Planning Council, so we're located just to the west of you all. I've been with the council now for about 12 years, but what I'm going to discuss this morning is the work that we've done with the Florida Wildlife Corridor and how that might be useful for you all. I understand you all are doing a lot of work with conservation right now. So hopefully what we're going to present will be useful for you and of course be helpful. How many folks, and maybe the easier answer is, the question is, who does not know what the Florida Wildlife Corridor is? Okay, so there's not a single thing that you're not knowing, but that's good. Just a brief background, just to kind of preface. Yes, sir?
How many of you what? Didn't hear the questions, sir. Speaking a little
We're going to be talking about the Florida Wildlife Corridor today. So just to kind of preface the work that we've done, just to give a little background on the Wildlife Corridor. As you all know, it just supported the network identified through legislature, the Florida Wildlife Corridor Act, that was passed in 2021, became effective in July of that year. The corridor extends from the Everglades north up to Georgia, across the Panhandle to Alabama. And it was created to help incentivize connections for our greenway networks and for our wildlife, right? But it also has a lot of impacts on the economy as well. It contains nearly 18 million acres, 9.6 million of which are in conservation today. Those are the dark green areas that you see on the map, with another 8.1 million acres of opportunity areas. And those opportunity areas are areas that are yet to be conserved, but were identified as part of what is the identified Florida Wildlife Corridor today. Just to explain that a little bit more and then also highlight what this map represents. The corridor itself was built on a data set that was developed by the University of Florida. It's called the Florida Ecological Greenways Network. That is constantly evolving. But that data and subsequent research and analysis that has gone into that has highlighted critical ecological significance areas throughout the state that you see listed there by those letters. Those are critical. You'll hear different words: bottlenecks, pinch points. They use the word gaps now, but these are the critical areas based on that data set and other subsequent research that's been done. Where extremely sensitive areas, but areas that may have potential gaps in the corridor if not protected moving forward. So how did we get involved in all this? In early 22, we were approached by Archbold Biological Station, a group within our region, who asked if we would perform a pilot study. And it was in our region. Central Florida is Polk, Hardy Islands, DeSoto, and Okeechobee counties. It also included Glades and Hendry to the south of us. But that pilot study led into a statewide study which commenced in October of 22. It was very fast and furious. We just completed the statewide study in September of this year. But essentially what that work involved was essentially a collection and correlation of data. As we've explained to a number of folks, this is not new data, this is public data. We just brought it together to put it into a useful format that would help folks in their endeavors in helping to protect the corridor. But what it was collecting that planning data, which included county parcel data, generalized future land use data from the Florida 2070 data set, infrastructure data like roadways, utility service areas, local government zoning data, and then building permits. We collected building permits statewide from every county from the years 2019 to 2023. And with the goal of this was to see where development is encroaching on these opportunity areas of the corridor, to make assumptions based on the data that we collected and collated, to find out if there were imminent threats on these opportunity areas of the corridor. And so with that, a number of data sets that came out of that was an inventory of lands with potential land use characteristics that were suitable for development, an inventory of potentially developable vacant parcels, that could be developed, 5 acres in size or larger, and then an identification of development activities across the state via the building permit data. And all of that was then generalized and summarized to provide an analysis for each county across the state. Took a snapshot out of one of the deliverables. This is Marion County, since we were in Marion County today. And what you see here, just to briefly explain what's on the map. The dark green areas, again, are those areas that are in conservation today. Light green areas, which you don't see a whole lot of on here, would be the opportunity areas. They happen to be covered by, and I know it's a little difficult to see, but some of that brownish area. Those are lands that are in the opportunity areas that have some form of land use today, or were found to be suitable for urban development in the future through the 2070 model to support future development. And then the purple polygons that you see on top of that, those are the identified vacant, potentially developable parcels. So those would be key parcel areas or lands, if you will, that might have the potential to develop in the near future based on the fact that they've got land use to support future development. And so what we found here, oh, and then, I'm sorry, the yellow points that you see there and the red points, those are the building permits for Marion County. And so what we found here was just north of 900 vacant parcels, 5 acres in size or larger, 142 of which are 50 acres in size or larger. And then between 2019 and 2023, almost 11,500 permits. It's pretty incredible. I don't think that there's any mystery that there's a lot of development going on in Florida. We have a lot of growth going on in Florida. But when you see those numbers, they seem somewhat enormous. But what we found here in this analysis was large concentrations of vacant, potentially developable parcels in the northeast and the southwest. Most of the new development, though, being outside of those areas. So in this case, not necessarily encroaching on those potentially developable lands, with the exception of the southwest area of the county, and I believe that that's down here, Cynthia and Denellen. There is a lot of development going on down there, and of course that is an extremely sensitive area with the Rainbow River. It is a key area of the corridor coming through the county and neighboring counties. So the analysis here would show that with all of the information that we brought together, if development continues in this area, there are imminent development threats to the preservation and conservation of the corridor in this area. Just to give you all a snapshot of the East Central Florida region, in total, just south of about 7,500 potentially developable parcels throughout the entire region, 1,289 of which are 50 acres in size or larger. And then a total of about 131,000 new development permits. The majority of that being in Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. I don't think that that's any surprise. Those are extremely fast-growing areas. But most of those new development permits, which unfortunately I don't have shown on this map, being in the more urbanized areas, but seeing that that is moving out, right? So there is encroachment as we move out from those city centers and those urbanized areas out into these areas where the corridor exists today. Looking at this statewide, and I realize this map is a little saturated, this is a data set of all of the permits that we brought in overlaid on top of the entire state of Florida. Looking at the entire data set for vacant parcels, 5 acres in size or larger, more than 27,400, 4,200 of which are 50 acres in size or larger. And then again, between 2019 and 2023, statewide, about 454,000 new development permits. And I did mention, when I say new development permits, these are new residential homes, new subdivisions, new commercial buildings, new commercial development. This isn't somebody putting a roof on their house or an accessory structure in their backyard. This is specific to new development. So something that wasn't there before that is there today. I'll tell you, there were a few counties through our outreach in this effort that we did not collect data. Some other local governments where the data we got in was not formatted properly, or we had a difficult time formatting it to get it into GIS to geocode it. But what you see here is about 80% of what is developed over the last 4 years in the state of Florida. So we know that there's more. And since this has been complete and during the effort while we were doing this, we know more development was happening. So this is on the low side for sure, and we respect this at about 80% of what we have seen in the state of Florida over the last 4 years. The circles that you see on this map, these identify some of the critical bottlenecks based on the data and the work that we did, right? So this is based on where those lands that have the ability to be developed, because they have a land use suitable for that, that are also in the opportunity areas, and then where we're seeing high concentrations of new development occurring within these areas where there's tight squeezes, if you will, of the corridor that is left unprotected and present gaps. So this is information based on the work that we had done. The map that you had seen previously in the beginning of the presentation with the work that other folks are doing with those critical bottlenecks. Some of these line up with that, and some of them don't. But I think that's the key to why we're doing all this additional research and looking at the corridor from additional angles. But in all here, when we calculate all of the potential suitable land for development in the future in the corridor today, there is still about 2.5 million acres that's available.
Excuse me, sir, I have a question for you.
We'll get to the end. We'll get to the end, and then we'll look
Talking
at
about a lot of buildings, but there's 2 or 3 neighborhoods that have been torn down for construction of other buildings that
We'll open it up. We'll open it up.
There's 2 or 3, there's at least 2 local communities that have some construction companies.
One second. If you allow him to finish, and then at the end, he'll answer all questions. I promise. He'll take questions.
It's okay.
Yeah, towards the end. All right. Continue.
Just a wrap-up slide here. Again, the data for use and how this can be useful for you all, how it can be useful for local governments across the state of Florida. We identify essentially 3, I think, primary data sets that have come out of this that what I like to call are maybe just another tool in the toolbox. But it would be those developable lands that are within opportunity areas that have that suitability for development today. That vacant parcel inventory by county, and then the building permits, right? That shows us the trends of where things are occurring. But again, this is just one piece of the puzzle. I know there's a lot of folks doing a lot of different things on a lot of different efforts with this initiative. But this is the work that we've done over the last year. I would hope that there's additional work in the future. I think that this could be extremely robust and helpful on a number of different fronts, including the work that East Central Florida is doing right now. This data will be available. We do have it. It is complete. We just wrapped up a summary for the state. But we have some channels to go through to get that all to you. But if there's anyone that would like to have this data for the efforts that you all are doing, then we're certainly happy to work together. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you all have on this. That was kind of fast and furious for sure, going through an extremely large effort that surprisingly we did in a year.
Appreciate it. Questions? You have the floor. You have the floor.
I'm all about county and state planning and keeping things viable, different things. I have noticed something. There's a construction company that are tearing up other people's houses in the community so they can build them.
It has to be related to what he's talking about.
Well, that's it. It's just so.
Okay. All right.
I won't break the meeting again.
You're able to talk, and we have an area for public comment.
So again, I'm here with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how FWC might fit into this puzzle and some resources that we very well may have for folks in this room listening as they look to address some of the things that have been talked about today. And so I want to start by saying that we have this concept, sort of a backbone idea right now in FWC, landscape conservation. And what that really means in effect is that's us telling ourselves and telling people on the outside that we are reducing the borders and the boundaries when it comes to sharing information, sharing resources, and sharing, pooling knowledge essentially. So, sort of an older model had a little bit more siloing happening. We are really interested in collaborating with folks all the way up to federal level down to, and across state agency boundaries, and then also very much, and perhaps most importantly, with municipalities and with counties. And that's essentially important to what we're doing right now, because that's where we find a lot of the knowledge is based, is in folks who are on the ground in different areas of the state. And so we are essentially, that's our way of saying, we're in a very collaborative mood, and I think that's across the board in natural resource stewardship in this country. Really. So me particularly, and my Office of Conservation Planning Services, we kind of think of ourselves as like the gateway to the agency, to FWC. You might think that would be more like if you have an alligator in your swimming pool, that might be a gateway to FWC. You might call someone with FWC or a bear in your trash. We do a lot of different things here at FWC, and we are one of the ways that you might be most likely to reach out to us, especially if you are a landowner or are involved in land use decisions. We are we're involved in those left and right. I want to, the two areas that are underlined here are sort of our two separate entities within my office. And I'm giving you a lot of, starting a lot of terms here, but this landowner assistance program here on the left, that's a really exciting area where we are able to go out on the ground and really engage with private landowners. We're you know, it's a voluntary program, and we are there to basically provide our expertise for folks who are looking to do different things on the land and the wildlife. That land use planning program is for land use changes that might be happening. That's most often going to be from some land use into residential. We are there to help you say, all right, how can we go about this in a way that does not disrupt listed wildlife species? So that's where we are basically helping to review a lot of these plans, a lot of these projects across the state. And so, returning to this landowner assistance program, I just want to make clear that this is a resource that has a lot of potential for folks who have private lands, and I think we're sort of steadily gaining in trust in this area, and in understanding that we're here, because it's kind of really like there's a free asset where you just give us a call and we're able to come out and basically advise private landowners to say, hey, maybe I'm looking, I would like to see more deer on my property, or larger deer, or I would like to see more wild turkey, or bobwhite quail. I'm wanting to see these on my property. How can I make this happen? We're helping folks to understand what that means to enhance wildlife habitat on private lands. We are also down to a smaller scale, so in a few acres who would like to see better pollinator habitat on their property. We have a really broad base of knowledge that we're willing to share. And maybe just as importantly, we also are able to pick out what the funding opportunities are for different folks. And there's quite a few of them, to be honest with you. We don't happen to have a lot of ways to share money, to cost share, but we know where they are, and we make those connections wherever we can. So this is sort of an appeal to anyone in this room. You may know of landowners who are they love their land, they love their property. They're not quite sure what to do in terms of managing it to accentuate the wildlife opportunities. This is kind of what we do. So we're out there. And we appreciate what folks already do with their So, excuse me. This has been touched on, and again, this is I think has gained in the awareness on this has increased, I think, exponentially over the past few years. I mean, Florida Wildlife Corridors is looked at internationally as a model and as a success. But what I think it helps folks mostly to understand, hopefully, is that if you're a black bear, if you are any type of, if you're any form of wildlife, you don't really care if it's a public park or a state preserve, or if it's someone's hunt lease, or if it's someone's cattle ranch. You're moving, you're going across these areas regardless of what the supposed tenure or ownership is. And that's where we have to understand, again, when I go back to this landscape conservation idea, it has to be an understanding that everybody is involved in this, whether you are aware of it or not. If you are, and what we're able to do and hoping to do as a state is to say, if you're hoping to meet some of these shared objectives, we're here to help. We're here to provide resources, money, whatever we can. And I want to hone in a little bit, get a little bit more specific, perhaps. I think of us here in East Central Florida as being sort of like a blending zone. If you're looking at this map, to the south you see a greater ratio of cattle pastures, things like this. And as you move to the north, right through our area, you start to pick up a little bit, or increasing amounts of timber plantations and things like that. So I think of this area as really a blending zone between these two sort of land use types, and that makes it really interesting. I think it makes for a lot of diversity here. And as I say, we are, what we want to do above anything is to say, we want to enable you to make decisions that might be compatible with what you're attempting to do as a private landowner. If you own a timber plantation, and you also know that you could have gopher tortoise population on your property, and maybe you want to be a recipient for gopher tortoises, because quite honestly, that's a very financially prudent decision for some folks. There's a lot out there in terms of financially speaking. So we're able to help folks make these decisions that blend what the private landowners are always obviously wanting and needing to do, and wildlife needs and requirements, because these are not incompatible. And I want to sort of briefly touch on, specifically when we're talking about really honestly funding. Within the East Central Florida region, we have two really large and really meaningful things that are coming down from the federal scale, quite honestly, as major areas of investment that touch on our East Central Florida region. So just to call a couple of them out, the Ocala to Osceola Wildlife Corridor. It covers a few of our counties here, actually. And it then extends all the way up to the Georgia line, right? So this is a key area for that initiative by itself. And the Lake to Lagoon, I know that in this room, you folks are very happy and excited about that right now, because that was recently announced. And that's obviously Lake George, the Indian River Lagoon. That touches a lot of what we have around here, right? And that is also includes, has received attention from really high scales in terms of it being an important region for us, and some investments going to be made there for multiple different landowners. So I guess what I would just sort of leave it on here is, I myself, and I'm going to take some questions, and if anybody wants to come chat afterwards, I'll be around. But I live in East Central Florida. I grew up in Volusia County. I live there now. I hope that we can sort of see ourselves here in this room as being a really key area for the overall movement of wildlife, really throughout the north to south in the state, right? From Essentially, this area, without it, you aren't seeing movement that would possibly go from the Everglades in the south to the Okefenokee Swamp, to two of the largest wilderness areas in the eastern U.S. We are a connecting area between those two areas, just for as an example. So I would leave that with you all as a way to sort of see ourselves and see what the importance of this region really is. So there's a little bit more. And maybe just a moment for a question. Just like going again, I'm around. I'm at work.
Any questions?